Folks, welcome back. I am Dale Jackson. I am a radio talk show host. You can hear my show Monday through Friday, 5 to 9 a.m. on WVNN in Huntsville, Alabama. You can also hear me in Chattanooga from 10 until noon. And we've got a very interesting character to get into today. And I want to talk a little bit about this because I think it's important to tell the truth. And I think a lot of people in our society today get away with not telling the truth. And it's pretty easy to get away with that these days because we have a media that either decides not to talk about the people that they like who aren't telling the truth, or they pretend that when they're not telling the truth, they are telling the truth. Jeremy DeVito is that guy. Now, Jeremy DeVito is a candidate for Congress in the 5th Congressional District in North Alabama. He is LARPing as a congressional candidate because he's not actually a congressional candidate. This is just a vanity project. There are legitimate candidates in this race. One of the Democrats in the race is a huge Dale Jackson fan. Used to listen to me, Andrew Sneed. So I assume he's at least the most sane Democrat on the ticket running. So I kudos to him. Huge Dale Jackson fan in the past. He told me so, almost with tears in his eyes, as if I had betrayed him. It was very entertaining. But what's not entertaining is Jeremy DeVito and his inability to tell the truth. Now, DeVito and I have had run-ins in the past on the radio, apparently twice. I only remember one of the interviews. But in one of those interviews, I banned him from my show because he's a liar. And he decided in the middle of a conversation, while I was describing the motives of a district court that redrew Alabama's 2nd congressional district, and I explained that they drew it for a black candidate, any black candidate, as long as they're a Democrat, it was drawn for a black Democrat. He says that's racist. And I'm trying to make him understand that you have to tell the truth. And I said, I'm not going to let you come back on my radio show until you tell the truth and apologize for calling me a racist. Now, he's not willing to do that, so he will languish in obscurity until he is destroyed in a Democratic primary where he will get between 10 and 15% of the vote. Now, that is all well and good, and I wish him the best in his silly little campaign that he's running, but his lying just continues to get more egregious every single day. After Renee Good was killed in Minnesota, Jeremy DeVito decided to take to social media during one of the protests, and you can see it on the screen right now, where I think there's like 13 people there, and proceed to tell you that this is the sign that the worm has turned on immigration. And yeah, I mean, look, there has been a week plus of extremely negative media coverage about immigration, all of it dishonest. And I don't think it's lying. Don't get me wrong. I'm not calling him a liar because I don't think he's a liar. He's an idiot. And there is a difference here. Liars are mischievous, malicious. They're conniving, they're plotting, they're scheming. This guy is not doing any of those things. He's not conniving, he's not plotting, he's not scheming. He's just dumb. And you can tell that by what he's saying in his live stream. He's one of these pretend revolutionaries. He'll tell you he's Antifa, but has he even burned a cop car? No. He'll tell you that he's a tough guy and remind you of his military service all the time, which people who have served in the military just do not appreciate all that often because it's just kind of lame. We can tell. We can tell. And he also, for some reason, and this is something that I still have not been able to understand at all, he likes to suggest that being edgy is cussing. And there's this thing now happening amongst Democrats where cussing is the way to go. And I guess towards the end of this video, he basically says F ICE in Spanish. It also means mess with ICE, which is also kind of fitting based on what's been going on as well. So I want to share this video with you and talk about what he's saying, mostly the parts he gets actively wrong. And there's a lot of them. There's a lot of these things that he just gets actively wrong. And because of that, I think it's important to talk about it because he could, if he wanted to, make his arguments and tell the truth, but he has made the decision that it is more advantageous to him to lie about what's going on than to actually tell the truth. And again, well, I said lie. See, I want to be clear here. I don't think he's lying. He has made the decision that being ignorant on the issue is more important than knowing what you're talking about. So he throws out a bunch of the stuff you've seen on television, nothing all that profound, but the stuff you've seen on television, for example, ICE has no authority to even be in cities. None of that's true. They absolutely do. They absolutely have that authority. So we'll go through this bit by bit here. It's excruciating, and I apologize, but let's go ahead.
I'm here in Athens, Alabama at a protest to show you just how far U.S. and Immigration and Customs have gone.
So look how far they've gone. There's about 15 people in that image. Okay, and they're standing out there, and there's some guy screaming into a microphone or something. Well, this guy, instead of participating in that, is filming a TikTok video. And he's here to tell you that his TikTok video is more important than, I guess, the event that he's taking part in. I don't know. That's kind of rude, but, to each his own.
This is not a general purpose police force. They are not peacekeepers. They are not community officers. They are not safety officers, and they are not authorized to roam our streets, conducting routine stops and acting as street police.
Okay, well, let's stop there because you're wrong about absolutely every part of that. One, they're not roaming the streets being routine police. That's not what they're doing. They are targeting individuals who are already marked for removal from the country. They're seeking those individuals out, and they have the authority to do just that. Their mission is immigration, and they go after non-citizens who already have orders of removal and warrants, and that's what they do. Now, they can arrest people that they believe are illegal aliens, and they're going to make mistakes, but that's not even what's happening here. What's happening here is the people that they're running into that are American citizens are coming to them and interfering. And that's what's happening. And by the way, they are federal law enforcement officers, so they can arrest U.S. citizens in limited circumstances. If they commit a federal crime in their presence, such as, I don't know, assaulting an officer with your vehicle, or interfering in an operation, such as hitting an officer with your vehicle. These are all simple things to know. We all know this already. Some of us are pretending that we don't understand it, and some of us don't understand it. I think it's possible he just doesn't understand this. Now, let's continue.
Their authority is narrow, specific, and limited, and with the blessing of this regime, they violate the Constitution they swore an oath to uphold.
Now, I believe what he means by this is they're not supposed to be deployed to the streets or violate the Constitution. In what way? I'm not sure. Their authority is constitutional. They do have the authority to go into cities and do the things they're doing. There's nothing unconstitutional about any of that. If he's suggesting that they can't be deployed to American cities, that's also incorrect. They can, in fact, be deployed to American citizens, to American cities. They can do that. There's nothing illegal. There's nothing unconstitutional about it. Nothing at all. If someone is approached by ICE who is an American citizen, they can provide their citizenship, or if they believe that they are in the country illegally, they can be processed and they can figure it out. Mistakes happen. I'm not going to argue they don't. But all the arrests of American citizens involve two things. One, interfering with law enforcement. Okay, that's the first. Or they're being stopped while they're dealing with illegals at the same time. So that's the issue here. But there's nothing illegal about this. Now listen to his take on the Renee Good situation.
Violate the Constitution they swore an oath to uphold. What we witnessed this week was a murder carried out by a paramilitary force conducting an illegal, politically motivated operation, somewhere they had no authority to be and where they were not wanted or needed.
Okay, first off, it's not up to the individuals in Minnesota, Tim Walz or Jacob Frey, to say whether they're wanted or not. It's not up to them. They don't get to make that decision. They don't have that authority to say you're allowed to be here, you're not allowed to be here. We don't want you here, so go away. You're seeing that. And if I'm Donald Trump, I keep doing exactly what he's doing. Every time they make the argument, we want you gone, I send more officers. They're not a paramilitary organization. They're not doing something unconstitutional. They have the right to be there. They were in the middle of enforcement operations, and Renee Good pulled her vehicle into the middle of that operation. That's why they were interacting with her. They weren't targeting her. It was the other way around. And it wasn't a murder. As you've seen, she hit him with her car. You notice he doesn't even address that. because that's inconvenient, because everybody knows if you hit a police officer with your vehicle and they shoot you, that's self-defense. Everybody knows that. And I think these protesters know it well, because you'll notice one thing they're doing right now is they're standing in front of cop cars because they believe that the cops will not run them over, which is a pretty safe bet, because they can't, just like citizens can't run them over. But again, Jeremy DeVito doesn't know this. He's not lying about this. He doesn't know. Okay, it's a skill issue for him. That's the issue. It's not that he's a liar. He's stupid. Remember that.
These are the consequences that anti-fascists like me have been warning about long before November 2024. Those of us who have been denouncing this immigration policy, a policy used to justify a so-called national emergency to override constitutional limits and to deploy military force into...
Okay, well, let's back up here for a second. One, he's saying there's a national emergency that overrides the Constitution. I'm a little worried that a guy who wants to be a congressman believes that's a thing, because it's not. And that's definitely not what's happened here. What has happened, and again, he doesn't know, it's not his fault. It's not his fault. What has happened here is there has been a national emergency declared on the southern border. Okay, that happened on January 20th. Now, it was all cartels, human trafficking, terrorism, illicit drugs, all of that, all of it. And it has been renewed for another year under the president's powers. There is the Emergency Economic Powers Act, and this is an important thing, a law that says he can deploy military resources, build barriers, and sanctions. He can put those on. Now, there's judicial oversight in this. Everybody knows that, and we've seen it. We've seen that judicial oversight be used repeatedly. Now, there's a lawsuit happening in Minnesota, but the judge has allowed these officers to stay in the area and operate. And obviously they're going to be able to, because they are federal agents. They're allowed to do so. But the National Emergencies Act doesn't override the Constitution. And I hope he understands this. He can deploy military forces in certain circumstances. The Insurrection Act is another one that we're about to see declared probably. And that, again, is within the power of the President of the United States. Jeremy should know this if he wants to be a member of Congress. I don't know why he doesn't know this, but he apparently doesn't. So again, military forces can be deployed in these circumstances. It can happen. Okay? It can happen, and it does happen. But that doesn't even cover the Border Patrol, ICE, DHS. That's irrelevant to this equation. But he can continue saying these things. And again, this is a feedback loop. He's saying things that other people believe, and they're both wrong on it, so they attaboy him.
Our cities have been warning about this since the election. This did not come out of nowhere, and it should terrify every one of us that people can be met with deadly force for protesting and observing.
Okay, let's talk about that for a second. Renee Good was not protesting and observing. They can call her an observer all they want. That's not what was happening. She was in a vehicle in the middle of the road. She was told, get out of the vehicle. Her spouse yelled, drive, baby, drive. And she did. So at best, she's fleeing an officer. At worst, she's assaulting an officer. But what she isn't doing is protesting, saying, I'm not mad at you, dude. I'm not mad at you, or whatever her exact wording was. It's not a protest. Putting your foot down on the gas, not a protest. Hitting an officer with your car, not a protest. She was not shot because she was protesting. There's people protesting all over the place, and they're not being shot. She was shot because she assaulted a police officer. That's why there will be no charge. And if they do somehow get a charge, there definitely will be no conviction. And again, I think most people know this. I don't think Jeremy does. He's not very smart. We've gone through this. So he may not know. It's not his fault. He's just ignorant.
Actions that violate the Constitution and basic human dignity. But ICE are being unleashed with no oversight,
Which is not true. Why say these? This is like the ignorant people who say that Congress isn't doing anything about this. Yes, they are. They're funding ICE at record levels. They're choosing not to defund ICE at record levels. That's not Congress not doing anything. That's Congress affirming this is what they want to do. And they don't have the votes to change it. They don't have votes to do anything about this. They do have oversight, so that's a lie. They do have accountability. That's a lie.
Accountability to perform acts of political violence.
Something you don't like is not political violence. You got to remember that. When you say this is political violence, that means something specific. It doesn't mean you don't like something that they're doing and therefore it's violence. That's not what political violence is. And if ICE was going into the crowd and fighting people, you might have something to say. But the crowds are coming to them. In this case, the crowd came to them and stood in the middle of... Sorry, you're both legal citizens. I can't do anything about it. It's just nonsensical. It's totally nonsensical. Does Jeremy believe that if someone stands in front of an ICE agent with a camera or a car, that the ICE agent just has to be like, damn, I guess those guys get away? Is that what he believes is supposed to happen here? He shouldn't believe that because that's stupid. But maybe he does believe that. Again, his call to believe something so dumb. But maybe that's it. Maybe that's the only way this makes any sense.
Agencies are unleashed beyond their legal authority.
They're not unleashed beyond their illegal authority, whatever the hell that means. I believe he means legal authority, but that's fine. Let's take it with what I think he means, and I won't be dishonest here and pretend that I think he's just an idiot. Well, I do think he's an idiot, but not in that case. They're not operating beyond their legal authority. The entire crux of this argument is that ICE is operating beyond their authority, which is just not true. Again, when the crux of your argument is false, the whole thing falls apart. This entire rant is fact-free. All of it.
The consequences are deadly. People are being harmed, and this immigration policy is directly responsible for creating the conditions that have made that harm inevitable.
So we shouldn't enforce immigration law because people like Renee Good, not you, of course, because Jeremy DeVito is never going to do these things. He wants you to do these things, not him. He's wearing Antifa clothing and telling you should be out there, you should be mad, you should do all this stuff, but not him. He's got a congressional campaign to run. He's not going to do it. You need to do it because you have no choice. You see, you're doing something that he doesn't like, so therefore people need to get violent. Makes it inevitable. They can't control themselves. It's not their fault. Just like I'm saying, he's stupid. He's not lying. He's just stupid. And just like everyone else who wants to interfere with ICE, they're just stupid. And they're doing things that they don't understand are wrong. So it's inevitable. They can't help themselves. I don't believe that. I think they have free will, and they don't have to do stupid things. He disagrees. Vote for him if you believe that.
Civilians have been subjected to wrongful detention, excessive force, and reckless operations, multiple shootings, repeated misconduct, the same failures over and over and over again. And this is not.
And why is ICE interacting with thousands of citizens? Why? Because they're getting in their face. ICE is not targeting American citizens. They're targeting illegal immigrants. That's why 75% of them have other charges, removal orders, and everything else. That's why they're arresting so many people in Minnesota, because it's a lawless hellscape. And by the way, it wouldn't have to happen this way if these weren't sanctuary cities. The reason why this is happening in blue areas is because they're sanctuary cities and they refuse to turn over illegal immigrants to ICE and DHS. That's what set all this up. And then they unleashed the mobs on them and told them to go and fight the police. That's what's happening here. It's not about public safety. It absolutely is about public safety. We have Americans being killed by illegal immigrants every single day in this country. And every single time we see this, every single time we see this, it is in the middle of an operation that a citizen has inserted themselves into. That's what's been happening. Now, if you're telling me that's not what's happening, give me some proof on that. But that is exactly what's happening.
About public safety. It is not about national security. This is what happens when unaccountable power is protected, when incompetence is excused, and when the far-right violence is tolerated in the service of a political agenda. It's not
far-right violence. So immigration is far right. Immigration enforcement is far right. I'll agree with that. Immigration, yes, the immigration enforcement is right wing. It's not right wing violence. The problem is the left wing violence being visited upon ICE agents and being supported and tolerated by a goofball in Athens, Alabama, wearing Antifa clothing and pretending that he's a revolutionary. He's not going to be revolutionary. You guys need to be revolutionary. Just ask this question. It's the only question you need to ask yourself. If all the Jeremy DeVitos went home, if all the Renee Goods went home, is there violence in the streets? And the answer is no. There are deportations, there are illegal immigration raids, but there are not American citizens interacting with ICE, and there surely is not violence in the street. So if ICE is allowed to do their job within the constitutional powers that they have, there wouldn't be any issues. The American citizens are targeting ICE. That's the issue.
Enforcement. It's state-sponsored violence. There is no reforming ICE.
Okay, this is an important part of this. I want to make sure you hear.
It's not enforcement. It's state-sponsored violence. There is no reforming ICE. Abolish ICE. Chinga la migra. And R.I.P. Renee Nicole Good.
Okay, so there's his congressional thing. You may have seen it. He said, mess with ICE or F ICE, depending on your reading of the situation. He said, abolish ICE. He wants to do away with it. He never lays out what he'd like to see replace it when it comes to immigration enforcement. His entire spiel, is based on a fact-free misunderstanding of the law. He cannot defend this. He will not defend this. It would be impossible for him to defend this. And because of that, he will just say these things unchecked. Now, the mainstream media is not going to cover this guy. Okay? A, he has no chance of winning. B, he is a revolutionary that they wish had a chance of winning. And if they cover him, people will see what a lunatic he is, and they will surely not vote for him. So they're sort of in a catch-22 in that situation. But I want to remind people of a couple things here before we close this up. It doesn't have to be this way. You can have legitimate disagreements and legitimate conversations about what's happening in our country, but you got to have the facts in order to do it. ICE is allowed to operate where they are operating. ICE is allowed to arrest American citizens who impede in their operations. If you can't grasp those two things, you're not fit to have this conversation, and you're not fit to run for Congress. What you're fit to do is put up TikTok videos that nobody really cares about unless they're a talk show host like me.